So, with that said, we've talked about a lot of the things that Cam talked about. If you like, we talked a lot about the production of beef, but as a farmer, I'd sort of be thinking about the volatility in the price that around the EYCI, the Eastern Young Cattle Indicator, and the other pieces that were there, and considering about the investment in a lot of the things that Cam talked about, and whether I would do that considering the volatility that's ahead, potentially with price. Why would I do that? So I guess it segues really nicely into the next presentation from Tim Jude, who is going to be presenting to us on budgeting for male calves, decreasing price volatility and risk by hedging beef price. So Tim Jude leads the StoneX livestock desk and is building out the protein risk management offering in Australia. Tim previously worked at Fulton Martin Group, where he was responsible for beef procurement across Australian and New Zealand domestic markets, as well as exports to Korea, Taiwan, Malaysia, UAE, Philippines, and the US. Prior to FMG, Tim worked at GrainCorp and Allied Pinnacle in the grain and flour industries. He has 10 years of experience in commodity procurement, hedging, and risk management, including providing advice to multinational food processors and manufacturers. Tim, the lectern is yours. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Cam. So my background is predominantly in risk management. I've been on the consumer side with McDonald's or Fulton Market Group. I've been on the processor side in the grain and flour milling industry. And now I find myself on the brokerage side. StoneX is a US-based company. We're listed on the NASDAQ. And we've been in Australia for about 10 years now, but under a different name, INTL FC Stone, which some of you who might be in that grain industry might recognise. We bought out Elders Risk Management, created a physical grain book in Australia, and that's been our main business. And more recently, we're moving into proteins and livestock, which is what I'm heading up. About 2 years ago, when I was still working for Fulton Market Group, procuring beef for McDonald's, we approached StoneX about helping manage and hedge our beef purchasing risk. Typically, the furthest out in front we could ever go on our beef purchasing was about 3 months. That's as far as any of the meat processors were willing to offer us. And typically what we found was if we wanted to go any longer, both sides of the market were offering on the same side. We both thought the market was going to go up or the market was going to go down. And so it was very hard to facilitate fixed price contracts at that point in time. So we approached StoneX about what they could do for us, and at the same time, StoneX had been approached by a group called Argus Media. So Argus Media are a price reporting agency, predominantly in Europe, and they wanted to enter the Australian space on agricultural price reporting, and so it sort of lined up pretty well that we engaged Argus at the same time. So we helped Argus create an index, a feeder steer index in Queensland. So our main problem was to come up with a specification for the index that captured as much pricing data as possible to mean that the price was reliable, but that the specification was tight enough that we could define some price relationships and correlations against other markets. The EYCI is a good indicator of generally what's happening overall in the cattle market in Australia, but it's very variable and it's got a lot of inputs, which means your correlations over a longer period of time break down. So we identified a specification for essentially feeder steers at entry weight into feedlots, 380 to 480 kilos, 0 to 2 teeth, flat back, so less than 51% TBC. Any animals that were traded within 300 kilometres of Dalby, so the Darling Downs, and all priced in cents per kilo live weight. And so the specification was built for who we thought were going to be the main commercial supporters of it to start with, who were going to be the feedlots and the backgrounders, and then build out from there. We started with 15 to 20 participants on the index on week 1, and the difference between the lowest price paid that week and the highest price paid that week was almost $1. I think it was 80 or 90 cents. And so within a very small geographic space, you could see the spread of cattle purchasing, and price transparency was very difficult to come by. Now we're down to a point where each week the price spread between the minimum and maximum price each week is about 15 to 20 cents. So all the participants of the index are gaining price transparency, they're finding price discovery a lot easier. And what that has done is made the market a lot more efficient, and it's made the pricing decisions for a lot of guys a lot easier. We're up to a pool of 130 participants in the index now, and each week we might get pricing data from 30 to 50 of those, so it's quite a resilient pricing index. And on the next slide, this is a segmentation of who's putting in pricing into the index. And so we've got feedlotters making up a grand proportion. There's also agents who are buying on behalf of feedlotters. We've got producers, so backgrounders, processors, so people who are trading in that space as well. Live exporters who are buying similar specification cattle. And then we've also got pricing ideas from end users, livestock financiers. There is some speculative interest in there, so people who are trying to build up exposure to the price of cattle without having to buy the physical cattle. And then end users, like where I came from at McDonald's and the dairy space, which we're developing now. So that's Argus. Argus set up the price index. I'm at StoneX. And so what we did is we stepped away from them. We left the index to become independent. And then we at StoneX are offering what's called a swap against that. So what that is it's something that allows you to trade the price of that index at the moment up to 12 months out. And we want to push that to 2 to 3 years if we can. So the idea is that we bring a buyer and a seller together who are happy to trade the price of feeder steers out in front. As I said, out to 3 years eventually, but at the moment 12 months. And then when it comes to the end of that contract, the idea is that it cash settles against the index. So you're always tied, or your results are always tied back to what's actually happening in a physical cash market. Our contract is priced in kilos, so 10,000 kilos. So as per the specification of 380 to 480 kilos, it's meant to represent 20 to 25 head. It's priced in cents per kilo. We're offering, at the moment, 12 months of the year, so you can trade December through till next December next year. And settlement is cash settlement. So what that means essentially is if you trade July next year, you buy paper cattle with us for July next year at $5, and the Argus index in July next year averages $5.50, we'll pay you 50 cents a kilo over how much you've traded on that contract. And so it's just meant to line up as a hedging mechanism for what you're doing on the physical side of your business. So if you need to buy feeder steers in July next year, you're exposed to that price if the market goes up. With us, you can buy those paper feeder steers now, today, and when it comes time to buy your physical, you cash settle, and the difference between what you've bought on the swap and what the index is should be the same as the difference in that physical market over that time, so you're ambivalent to what the physical market's actually done. This has been the performance of the feeder index since inception, so it started in August last year. And it's followed pretty much in line the ECI, but it has been more closely aligned with values in southern Queensland, especially for feeders. And on the right is what we call a forward curve. So it represents the pricing we've got on the forward pricing for our swap at the moment. So this is the midpoint of the bids and offers we have moving forward on the swap. So if today the current index price is $4.91 a kilo, I think, the midpoint for bids and offers out through till July and August next year is $4.35 at the moment. And so realistically, the bids actually are $4.20, the offers are $4.50, and so we're just representing what the midpoint is there. So we've got people actively trading an inverse at the market. We've got cattle backgrounders who identify that this sale price, whilst lower than today, is still historically a very good sale price, and they can derive a margin from that. And then we've got cattle buyers who are happy just to lock in a discount at any stage they can. And so at the moment, that's what we're representing on the forward curve. A little bit of background about some contract specifications, and so we call it an OTC product, which means over the counter. So some of you might have heard about futures, like grain futures, cotton futures, wool futures. There has been attempts to list livestock products in the past in Australia on exchanges, and people have just thrown them up, say on the ASX or a couple of other small exchanges, without really supporting the contract. And so what's happened is they've put it up and expected people to trade it, but in reality, no one's traded it before, and the skills don't exist within the industry to use it, and the confidence don't exist. And so what we decided to do was keep it off and keep it OTC for now, which means it's traded through StoneX. And so what we're spending 90% of our time doing is sitting down with people, educating them about how to use the index, what hedging is as a basic concept, how to build it into the accounting for your business, and build up the know-how and the confidence within the industry to build it from there. We think that it'll probably list on an exchange like the CME, the Chicago Merc Exchange, in 12 to 18 months if we're successful, but it's up to us to find liquidity at this point. The good thing about OTC is that it maintains anonymity. So StoneX sits in the middle of all trades. So there's a buyer and a seller on each side. We sit in the middle, and you never see who's on the other side. And so that's an important consideration in the cattle market. It also means that you don't have to manage credit risk with a number of other counterparties. Your only counterparty for payment is StoneX, and so you don't have to create a credit matrix essentially to be trading with a number of other counterparties. The other problem you might find on futures, say if you're trading grain, is you could get into a position and then due to low liquidity, you find it very difficult to get out of that position. When it comes time to get out, there's not a fair bid market or offer, and you might spend $20 or $30 outside of what a fair market value is to get out of your trade. With us, because we cash settle against the physical index, it means worst case scenario, your values are tied to what the actual physical cattle are trading that week and that month. Why is this concept relevant to dairy? So we are a bit derived from dairy calf values, there's no doubt about it, but while Cam's starting from the very beginning of the dairy calf supply chain, we're coming in from the other side, from the consumer side. So as Cam said, there is demand there from the consumer if the product is the right product. And if there's demand from consumer, there's demand from processor, and if there's demand from processor, there's demand from feedlotter and from backgrounder. And one of the biggest problems is attracting capital in this space, and people aren't willing to do that and invest 6 months forward, 12 months forward, 24 months forward if they don't know what their price is going to be on the other end. And so the space where we'll sit is by providing a mechanism for pricing between the consumer and the meat processor, allowing them to come up for a price for the fully fed out dairy calf 12 months, 24 months forward. And if that's the case, then the processor can also come up with a pricing mechanism between the feedlotter as well. And what that all builds down to and it cascades down to is a fair market bid for the dairy calves you might be producing every day. And that's the other thing Cam said as well, is that when this market becomes speculative and you lose touch with your supply chains that want this product, it becomes much harder to sustain over the long term. And so what Cam and I are trying to build together is a fully integrated supply chain from consumer right the way back to calf producer in a way that it can be priced any day of the week out in front the whole way through. So the price of the dairy calf can be linked to the price of the meat probably to 24 months, 36 months in advance. I'll skip through this a little bit just because we're running out of time. So it's a very basic example of how this would operate in reality. If you're a buyer of feeder steers, you're exposed essentially to a rising market. And so you know that you've got to buy feeder steers out in front. Your biggest price risk is the market going up. We could be sitting here today and you've got not a bid, but information that tells you that forward the price is going to be $5. You can't action that bid, not on the physical markets. But on the OTC markets with us, you can come in and buy feeder steers for, say, the same price out in front for when you actually need to be selling these physicals. This is the case of a rising market, so it comes time to actually buy these feeder cattle. Turns out the information was wrong, the market's gone up, it's gone to $6, and that's what you need to spend on your feeder steers. But luckily you've bought paper here at $5, and so now that paper's worth $6 because we're cash settling against the physical market. So we've made a $1 a kilo gain on our hedge, and so that offsets the purchase price we've had to make at a higher price in the future. So the $6 is offset by the $5, and essentially all you've done at the time is set your purchase price there. And that's what we're talking about. It's not about speculation. For some it might be, but for anyone who's actually in the industry playing with physical cattle, this product here is used to set margins, and it's here to set pricing. Once you've done this, you should really be ambivalent about whether the market goes up or down. It doesn't really matter if you're using it as a margin setting tool because you're picking a price that you know you're setting a margin at. And that links back into this whole dairy beef space, is that when you're making a decision whether to put the money, the time and the effort into either breeding this calf in the first place or growing it out yourself, you need to be assured that the margin's there at the back end, and that's what we're really trying to help to do from the very other end of the industry as Cam, on the supply chain. But that's the whole concept. I might wrap it up there, Cam, that's all I've got. Yeah. Thank you.